There you go.
Okay, we are off and running here. Hello and welcome everybody to Long Toss episode 304, season 3, episode 4. And oh boy, a little bit of positivity as we round out this series against Tampa Bay. I don't know how positive the whole scene looks, but some positive things to take from today anyways. If you are on board here, are we rolling live? It is going? Okay. So go ahead and drop your comments into the YouTube. We will obviously get to that as we go. Like and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast and Instagram, The Walk Off Podcast. And away we go. We're going to go around the horn here and introduce you to our guests. So we have with us from the Walk Off Mariners, Juan Forno. Thank you for joining us, buddy, and taking the helm here last week. You hosted your first long toss. How did it go?
I think there was actually an audio issue because I would mute myself on Zoom but not mute myself on Streamlabs. So I'm pretty sure everybody heard my private conversations that were logged into the live because I was muted and then having beer requests and stuff. But other than that, I think it was okay. Maybe Jen can specify whether or not it went well as a guest on the panel. But for the most part, there was some bumps, but I think we figured it out. All right, it was fun.
Perfect, which transitions great into our next guest, our regular, the lady who holds down the fort every single week. Jen, welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to be here. How was last week?
I thought last week went well. You know, we held down the fort in your absence, and got a show out there, and that was the important part, right?
That is the key. That is what we're trying to do here. And then, of course, very excited to have back. It's been a while, Craig. Good to have you back here from Jaybird Watching Podcast. How's it going, man? How's your week?
It's going good. And actually, I was at the most ridiculous comeback baseball game that I've been at in a long time right before you moved to town. So I was at the Twins game last Saturday that they, pulled the rabbit out of their hat and had both extremes. So we've been riding that high a little bit on our show since then. But to that point, it's been a mixed bag over the last week still, regardless of that huge upside that day.
Yeah, right. And this is the thing. We'll get into it here because this team's back is obviously against the wall as they have been absolutely horrendous the last little over 20 games, going 7-15. They needed a big series win against the Rays and really just had a couple of very disappointing games on Friday and Saturday, just barely avoiding a perfect game to Tyler freaking Alexander. And then, honestly, the rally looked like it was going to happen. And with a runner on, down by one after scoring 3 runs, George Springer hits into a double play. And that's kind of where that ended. And then it looked like they were going to take yesterday's game and then wound up blowing it in the 9th inning. Again, to no offense to these guys on the Rays, but what feels like background actors, like the secondary roles on this team. So today was a huge day because we watched Alek Manoah last start show some real progress for the first time in what I felt like was over a year. He went 7 innings, even though he did give up those 3 unearned runs in the 7th. He did get through 7 innings, which was impressive. And then today had probably his most dominant big league start, arguably, of his career, going 7 innings, 1 hit, 7 Ks. Jen, let's start with you. Where are you at on Alek Manoah? Because I'm starting to have a little bit of hope that maybe this is a salvageable, good starting pitcher.
I am cautiously optimistic. I think that today was a huge step forward, which I really wanted to see a second, outing from him. I know his last outing was quite decent, but I wanted to see a second outing. Like, what does he do the next time out? And he was dominant today, and he had that passion. He had that fire coming off the mound, and, really looked like he was, his back to his old self in a lot of ways. There were a few moments of frustration, and I thought Alejandro Kirk handled him very, very well today. And, kind of kept him on his game plan, and, kept things rolling for him, and helped keep him focused. And, he executed. So, sincerely, good for him. I don't know, where everything stands in terms of, his process, not to use that word. I don't know where he stands, with his mechanics. Is it something that he can continue to repeat, outing after outing, inning after inning? That remains to be seen. But today was a huge step forward, and it's exactly what the Jays need. I'm still not thrilled at all with the fact that they were relying on him to be the fifth starter coming into this season, because there was, an equally, an equal chance of us not getting this out of him this season, right? But if he is going to, be a fifth starter and actually give them decent to great outings more often than not, then that just makes this team, stronger in that aspect.
Couldn't agree more. And you know what? Credit where credit is due, because we have been hard on Manoah, especially more recently, because it has been such a long period of a long stretch of time. It's a pretty big sample size that he has been struggling. And so it's pretty easy to point that out. But you know what? We've been pretty harsh on Vogelbach. He had a very good game today, going 3 for 4, almost going for the cycle. Of course, no one expected him to get that triple to round out that special little thing. He has one triple though, but let's be serious. This is a team that desperately needs some power, and he came up big today. George Springer didn't look completely incompetent at the plate for the first time in a while, and that's good. So, okay, so there's no live feed in YouTube right now, is what I'm hearing and seeing.
There's something about they put in the comments, guys are live, but this is a different URL. There's 15 of 20 people still waiting in the original one. Is that because it's on mine?
Oh, maybe that's what's happening. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to fix that.
Couldn't tell you, man.
Okay.
Are you able to go into the other one and
yes.
maybe?
So I'm going to leave a comment here for everyone. And my apologies to everyone who is watching this, because we constantly are see, Adam is the king. He knows all what's going on here. And Adam has softball at this exact time. And so Juan and I have decided to take the reins here, so that long toss carries on and we're still learning how to do it. So let me see here if I can drop a comment. I'll go on to here. While I do this, I'm going to throw to you, Craig, and going to ask you about Daniel Vogelbach and where you're at on a guy that most people is running out of patience with. This is a guy that is a minor league contract dude, made the team, which does put a $2 million price tag on him for the rest of the year. So if they are to let him go, there is a little bit of money involved. So please go ahead and take the round while I try and let everybody know what's going on.
Be honest, I can't say we haven't been doing anything but bash Daniel Vogelbach being on this roster on our show just as much as anybody else has been. But today we finally got to see some payoff to what you can see from him in a lineup. You mentioned that he was a triple away from the cycle. I think it's more ironic that he scored 3 runs, because that just doesn't happen either. He's not exactly the speediest of guys on the base path, but he was able to get around for 3 of the 5 runs today. But at the end of the day, my biggest problem with up to this point, without getting any level of any production from Vogelbach, has been the fact that Spencer Horwitz is just destroying the baseball down in Buffalo. And then you also are eventually going to get the, hopefully some kind of level of Joey Votto being maybe a catalyst to this team. I have no idea if that's really going to happen or any true. I heard the baseball activities thing is quote unquote having soon for him, but that's about all anybody's heard. But Vogelbach does have that power piece, to your point, that is very intriguing one way or the other. That home run he hit today was a very low, but right down the middle of the plate, and he did destroy it. But that's the kind of thing you do need to see him doing more than not, especially on these days where he does just happen to squeak into the lineup to give JT a turn on the bench or whatever it is, any of those kind of good things. But there is some potent parts to that bat, but I'm also wondering if some of the Buffalo Boys 2.0 is actually a bigger aggregate in that equation too. So I'll give you 50-50 if he sticks on this roster much longer, even if he can, unless he's going to go on a Davis Schneider kind of trek here over the next few weeks, which I don't see coming.
Now, Juan, if anyone knows the ups and downs of Daniel Vogelbach, it is a Mariners fan. Obviously, Danny Burgers hitting 30 bombs with you guys back in 2019, which, by the way, 2019 is a year I tend to take with a grain of salt when it comes to power numbers because of the juiced ball and how much there was surrounding all of the Goldilocks balls and the just I know Goldilocks balls was later on, but you know what? So much talk around the balls. When you look at a guy like Vogelbach, how much playing time would you expect a dude like that to get? And are the Jays kind of seeming desperate, trying to catch lightning in a bottle here?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm a big Danny Burgers guy over at the Walk-Off Mariners. Obviously, my co-host Jordy fucking loves him. But you know, it's tough to roster a guy like that because he doesn't offer anything in the way of speed. There's no defensive capabilities there. He's all or nothing power, and if he's not contributing via power, then there's no reason to roster him, whether it's in AAA stashing as a left-handed bat or on the big league roster. You know, you're never going to get a good average out of him. You know, if he's hovering around 220, you call that a win, but it's got to come with that power. And it's tough to get into that rhythm as a bench bat. Obviously, he's not going to fill in at DH full time, whether you guys are rotating Springer or Vladdy or whoever else you're trying to keep healthy in a full-time role. So it's tough to roster a guy like that on the bench if he's not consistently contributing power as a pinch hitter or as, you know, somebody who's getting a spot start at the DH position. There's just not a lot of flexibility outside of that power aspect that he can offer.
Which is a great point because what the Jays need is power, and they have right now in AAA Spencer Horwitz, 26-year-old, who has been lighting it up. He leads AAA in doubles. He walks an astronomical amount of the time. His on-base percentage is fantastic. Where he lacks is slugging. Right? He's not a home run guy. He's going to run into some here and there. And positional versatility is definitely one of those things where you wish he played certain positions a little better because there isn't really a lot of space for him at first base, and left field is crowded. Of course, they're giving him reps at second base. But Jen, do you think a guy who just projects like Horwitz does right now is going to do more for this team than Vogelbach, and also keeping in mind that he is 26 and the best thing for him is reps, most likely? Are the reps there? Like, can they find a spot for a guy who hits like this if he's going to do it at the big league level?
Well, that's just the issue, right? Is can he actually get into game after game, right? There's no point in calling him up if he's only going to play twice a week. And so that's where the problem lies. And I don't know that they can fit him in, but this team needs to score runs. This team needs to score runs. We can't put a fine enough point on that. And unfortunately, they need to hit more home runs too, right? Now, Vogelbach can give you that, but if he's only playing twice a week, and, you know, how many home runs can he realistically hit? So great game out of him today. Today will forever be known as the Danny Burgers game, but
yeah,
right. The whole time I was thinking, you know, it's too bad that this is not somehow like promoted by A&W, and you know, because all I could think of the whole time was, you know, what's up, Burger Boy, when he was rounding the bases. But you know, I don't think he's going to get enough at bats to make a difference, and B, you know, Yeah, it's a waste of a roster spot. It really truly is. And I don't know, like the speculation is that, he's just filling that spot until or until Joey Votto can return. And I find that a little far-fetched at this point. Because Joey Votto, first of all, is he going to be a difference maker on this team? Who knows what he has in him? He had what? One at bat in spring training, hit a home run, and then fell off the face of the earth, right? He's done hardly anything since then, baseball wise. So when he returns, what can he possibly give them? So I really feel like that's not why Vogelbach is still sitting on this bench. I think it's because they don't have the playing time for somebody from AAA.
Especially with the guys that could possibly get the bump in AAA being somewhat prospects and still needing to develop in their own right. So to bring a guy up like that and then just sit him on the bench, that's probably going to be a negative thing for developing them as a player. So to everyone in the YouTube right now, thank you so very much for joining us. My apologies that things started a little bumpy there. Yes, we did have to switch streams. If for some reason anyone is still in the other URL, then please go ahead and make some comments there. I know I put the official walk-off comment there, but help out our fellow grounds crew members here as we are struggling through our technological deficiencies.
Scott,
lots to...
Sorry, buddy.
Yes.
Are you able to see the chat on Streamlab?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to interrupt because there was actually some good points on the topic that we were just talking about. I wasn't sure if you were able to see it or not. Somebody made a good point about keeping Horowitz if they're going to trade Vladdy to come and fill in that role, or trade Horowitz to get better if you're going to keep Vladdy. I don't know if you guys wanted to discuss that, but I thought that was an interesting point. But I think Mark Ryan made that point.
Yeah, Mark Ryan, regular listener, very good point. And I think that is something that we probably will wind up seeing is Horowitz will be stashed until it is decided whether this team is buyers or sellers. And of course, we are going to get into that. So if you missed it, everybody, we got lots to talk about. We're going to finish breaking down this Jays Rays series. The Ross Atkins presser. Of course, we are going to touch on that. It's a process, folks. Stick with us. George Springer, is there any hope in a resurrection for this man, or is he washed? We'll go around the panel. Chance of help coming? I don't know. Atkins mentioned AAA guys could help soon. What does that mean? How deep down does that say sell when he says that? Like, how much are these AAA guys going to help? And it's not that I don't have a belief in Addison Barger or Spencer Horowitz or Aroldis Martinez, one of the top 100 prospects according to Baseball America, but that's a lot to put on guys that are currently playing in Buffalo. So we'll touch on that. We'll also get into the Mariners. We'll check on the Mariners. This is kind of crazy. So their record, Juan pointed this out to me, their record when scoring 3 runs or more is 80% wins.
Yeah,
80%. 3 wins. Like, that is absolutely insane, especially when I just saw on the broadcast today with the Blue Jays that they are something like 15-2 when they score 5 runs or more. So the Mariners are almost doing the same thing with 2 fewer runs. So we'll kind of check in on how everyone feels about sustainability of that sort of model. And then we'll talk some Paul Skeens if we got some time. And of course, we'll get to everyone's subject that they're going to throw out there for us to all talk about, the topics. Okay, so back to this series. I will go to you here, Craig, and just get your opinion on if there are positives to be taken from this Tampa Bay Rays series. I know it's still a series loss. There were some bright spots. There were some things to be taken away. I did like that this team didn't say die when it looked like they were going to be no hit, give up a perfect game to, again, the name Tyler Alexander. It just like keeps rolling through my head of like, how how is it always these soft tossing lefties that are like, borderline major leaguers? No offense to Tyler Alexander, but like, he had the game of his freaking career, and it always seems like it's the Jays that this happens to. Craig, do you want to step in here and just talk a little bit about how you feel about this series, if there are actual positives to be taken from it, and if this team can build on it?
So I'll start off by saying that I think it's hilarious too that I think I made this unfortunate jinx a few years ago with the Blue Jays, and you mentioned it a little bit here, was the fact that we always get beat by the rookie pitcher, or we always get beat by the guy that's throwing barely 86 miles an hour. We're basically getting dusted by the equivalent of Mark Burley all the time, right? It just happens. It's I don't know how it happens, but as far as the Tampa Bay series itself goes, the one thing I thought that was really the one big thing you got to take away from it was, if this team in the clubhouse was truly starting to think gloom and doom and they're going to tear us apart, this team really can't be a team anymore, all these wonderful things that you would think would have been infiltrating the players in that clubhouse at this time of the year with a horrible start that they have had, they wouldn't be wanting to go out there and try and win those games, having a 3-run 8th inning against Alexander, like you had mentioned, and just hanging around in those games and then being a little, tenacious to that point. And so I think there's something that they know that they're a better team. It's not just the fact that everybody thinks they are a better team, whether it's going to actually finally come forth where we all get to experience it and get to see them actually go on a run here. That is just yet to be seen, correct? But there is something going positive here in that clubhouse, that they are, at least they have the will to stay in these games against those guys like Alexander that, basically sat them down on the bench for 7 innings in a row. So I think that's what they have to take ahead on this. And as they go forward over the next weeks here, they need to start capitalizing on that, not just trying to play the comeback gang every time.
It's funny too, because I've kind of calculated it out, and I'm like, this team needs to go 10-2 in their next 12 games to reasonably, and that's such a tall order. But I know, Juan, you can speak to this a little bit. I mean, the Mariners, they love doing this to their fans. They've done it the last couple of years in a row, where it's like by the All-Star game, everyone in Seattle is like, well, this was a waste of an entire season. And then they go on some crazy run and just about make the wild card or even push for it. And then, of course,
game short,
embarrass the Toronto Blue Jays. Exactly. So how at what point, like from an outsider's point of view looking in, at what point do you start to write the Toronto Blue Jays off? Because this fan base, and I'm a little guilty of this myself, I'm really leaning towards this thing's over. I also have watched enough baseball to know that's not a true statement, but you know how fandom goes. So from an outsider's point of view, where are your thoughts on the Toronto Blue Jays and their struggles right now? And if you look at them and you're like, you know what, Jays fans are overreacting a little bit, where are you at?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question, just looking at the division they're in, right? The Yankees and the Orioles are so good this year that it makes it a lot tougher knowing that you guys got to consistently play those teams throughout the year. The division is going to be a nightmare to get back into, and then you got to look at the wild card spots. You're looking at probably the Texas Rangers or the Mariners. The Central looks a lot stronger than it has in years past, and you'd like to believe the talent on the roster, and the roster is definitely good enough to get them back on track and get them into a position to chase a wild card spot at the end of the season in September, late there in the fall. But it's not going to be easy, right? And it's going to take everybody. Vladdy's going to have to continue to hit. Bo's going to have to step up. The pitching is going to have to continue doing what it's doing. The bullpen's got to be better. It's going to take a lot to click right, but the talent is there, so it's not unfathomable, and it's still early enough in the season where it's still possible. I'm not necessarily sports betting on the Jays right now, but I do see a path where, things just start to click a little bit better. Luke Raley is a perfect example of a guy that I was super down on at the start of the season for the Mariners, and now he's hitting almost 300. So plenty of time to turn it around. The roster is strong. The pitching is strong, and, good pitching wins series. We all know this. You got to figure it out soon for sure, but you guys you guys split with Baltimore and look not so bad. You were one pitch away from sweeping technically that 2-game series with Baltimore this week, and you just got beat by a good player just barely. It was about a foot gone. when Adley walked off on you guys. So, and you lost to a good team in a good game. You guys were competitive both games against Baltimore. So no reason to think that you guys can't turn it around. It's got to happen quick, and you're shooting for a wild card spot, I think, just due to how strong Baltimore and New York is this year.
Jen, do you think there is something to build off of when you look at the last couple of series, or the fact that they're just barely losing doesn't make it any easier for this team? I know we're talking psychology here, but can this team springboard off of these few positives they've had?
I don't know. They haven't put together anything consistently this entire season, right? And so until they do it, I'm not convinced they can do it. And, if you take a look at the 2 losses to the Rays this weekend, during that first loss, their offense was completely shut down for 8 innings. And in that second loss, the bullpen blew it. And those have been the 2 weaknesses of this team the entire season, right? Starting pitching has been really great overall. Few blips here or there, but overall, it's the strength of the starting pitching as to why the record even is what it is. And how sustainable is that? Right? When is there an injury potentially? Whatever happens there, when 2/3 of your sort of, two-thirds of the facets of your team haven't got it going, and are ranking towards last in all these different categories, that's where the concern really is. And we always look at what the record was the previous season, right? The Jays had 89 wins last season and got into the wild card with 89 wins. So to get to 89 wins right now, I believe they need to go 69-40 the rest of the way, which is a .633 winning percentage.
Yeah, it's wild. And that's the thing, is it is looking like it's going to take 90 wins to get that third wild card spot. So.
I'd love to change my answer now. I didn't know the math behind it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it, like, to me, that the math ain't mathing here, right?
Guys, leave math out of this.
Isn't that how we got this hole to begin with the analytics department? Come on.
So what is Juan? You're sitting in front of the comment section right now.
Yeah, I think everybody's.
What?
Sorry, go ahead. You good?
Is it? I was just going to ask you for a temperature check of the positivity and if there's anybody who is like, you know what, let's not. It's pretty negative.
I don't think anybody's jumping to the Blue Jays' defense, but I do think, there's been some comments of let's see how the next 2 weeks go, and I do think those 2 weeks are going to be important. I don't know what your guys' schedule is like, but
6 games against the White Sox.
Oh, that is going to help a lot.
Breather.
that you'd love to catch a White Sox team at this point in the season. Nobody's really jumping to the Blue Jays defense in the chat for sure.
Speaking of not jumping to the defense, let's get into the Ross Atkins press conference, which, Jen, you had a tweet that just nailed it so well. And I'm paraphrasing here, so feel free to correct me as I go here. But basically, the premise of the tweet was this whole press conference was for no other reason that if for some crazy reason this team does get it together over the next 2 weeks, Ross Atkins can be like, see, I told you, it's a process.
Well, everybody was questioning the timing. I know fans have maybe wanted to hear from Ross Atkins, but why right at that particular moment, right? Why 10:45 on the Saturday of a long weekend? And, other than to kind of bury it a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Which, hello, Ross, we can all see that what's happening here. But I thought, this whole concept of practicing or preaching patience, but urgency. We're urgently patient or patiently urgent. I don't know which way we're going here. But I thought to do that ahead of an upcoming soft schedule, which, realistically the Jays could, win the next, 6, 7, 8 games, let's just say, and then that makes everything look so much better on paper. And look, yes, we just had to be patient. And I feel like that's just, part of the timing of it as well. I listened to the entire thing in my car while driving. And the entire time was just like waiting until I got to my destination, like drive faster so that I could like tweet about it.
You could physically see the people in the traffic listening to the press. They're like, what the?
And I
near
mean,
road raging.
I thought on the outside chance, very, very outside chance, that he might have scheduled it to announce some sort of a coaching change, like probably related to hitting coaches. And when he didn't start with a speech, when it started with just taking open mic questions, that's when I knew it was exactly what we kind of figured it would be, which was a whole lot of nothing.
And I don't think anyone expected anything else, but it really was like throwing a bucket of chum into an already hungry bunch of sharks. Like, it was really interesting, and timing is exactly what you question, right? It's like, keep hiding, Ross.
So he kept saying that, they've got to be better. They've got to be better. And I kept waiting for somebody to ask, how?
Yeah.
How are you going to get better? And I don't think, it was hard to hear the questions being asked, but I don't think anybody actually asked how. Only Buck Martinez asked, at what point do you decide the team's not good enough? Which I think was, pretty much the strongest question of the entire scrum, because you can tell Buck's just had it.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
You could hear it on the broadcast.
You can hear it on the broadcast. You could hear it last season, right?
Yeah.
And he's been around long enough. He doesn't care. So good for him. But that's.
I love that old man, 74-year-old mentality of like, fire me. The last year I'm gonna broadcast, I gotta watch this shit. Like that is
love him or hate him, he is synonymous with Blue Jays baseball, right?
Yeah.
So he does not care. He's gonna say it however he sees it, and that actually makes him, really
endearing.
really, really great. Where the hell was I going with this? But no, but
hey,
you
sound like Ross Atkins right now. Where
I wanted
the hell
somebody
are we
to
going
ask
with
him,
this?
like, how are you going to get better? What are the steps that are going to be taken, right? Is it a change in approach? Is it this? Is it that? And I just, we just heard the same tired phrases come out of his mouth. And, as soon as it was done and it went back to Sportsnet today, the two guys, and I'm not sure who it was who was doing the show, just absolutely roasted him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely
Rubinoff,
roasted him.
and
This did not go over well with anybody.
Yeah.
Nor
should it.
I actually had a different takeaway from that press conference, because I actually read it. I'm trying to be more in depth with Blue Jays news, and I think he's prepping the fan base for a sell-off. It read to me that he's saying, hey, we got some good kids coming up in AAA so that we can trade off some of these major league pieces and not getting the job done. So I think he's laying the groundwork for, if they don't turn it around, we're going to sell at the break. That was my takeaway.
Juan, my fear is he's going to be allowed to.
Yeah.
Which,
we talked about that a lot last week.
Which doesn't help a lot of people from that history of trading you see.
I mean, listen, and I know the grounds crew gives me shit about this, especially the more negatives. Well, no, I shouldn't say more negative, but the people who have been down on Ross Atkins for a year or 2 years or even longer, right? Because I was always the guy of like, it is a process. We should give it time, like to use Adam's comparison of he's baking a cake, right? So he's got all the ingredients. Let him cook, right? Let him cook. But now that we have this cake and it tastes like shit, I don't want Ross Atkins baking another cake. Like, and
it's been what, 9 seasons?
I know I'm all.
Is that what it's been?
Long enough, to your point.
Yeah, it's been long enough.
Yeah,
right?
It's been 9 seasons.
And
I always bring this up. You get one rebuild. You get one rebuild.
Yeah. So I got to make this horrible Blue Jays comment because I got the Angry Bird logo printed out behind me on my board here. How far away is Ross Atkins from writing and pulling a full Shea Hillenbrand and saying this ship is sinking and walking out?
I'm taking my City Connects and I'm leaving. Yeah.
That's a great question. Which player on this roster would be the one to do it?
Bo.
It is a fun one. And I wonder how, I feel like this team, everybody on that doesn't have the balls to do that part right now. I think that's part of the problem of why we haven't taken that next step to it. So you hear it that they're all calling each other out and trying to get things going and everything, but you don't hear that person really taking the reins, right? That's the catch, I think, with this team with right now. So
interestingly
had to make the
enough,
joke. I couldn't help it.
Interestingly enough, and Juan, I think the Seattle Mariners home run celebration is one of the goofiest and more fun ones out there. It's so over the top, it's almost endearing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone caught it, and I will put you, Juan, on watching the chat here because I do want a temperature check. But the Blue Jays do have a new home run celebration. And I don't know if anyone saw it, but basically after Vogelbach, today's the first time I noticed it, but after the Vogelbach home run, they got out the red carpet. They laid a red carpet down in the club or on the bench there. And as Vogie goes by and they all go over it, which in my opinion is kind of the most corporate home run celebration you could possibly think of. Let's lay down a red carpet. Can we put a Budweiser logo at the end and they all yell out, home runs are for buds at the end, right?
It could be a green carpet.
King of home run beers.
So, chat, grounds crew, let us know. What did you think of the new home run celebration from the Blue Jays? Something that the fans have been uber focused on over the last couple of years since the jacket went away last year. Everyone has felt like, especially as you watch other organizations have so much fun with the power. Since the jacket went away, we stopped hitting home runs and it stopped being really fun, right?
The jacket with the red carpet would actually work well.
Right?
Right?
Like they're doing a fashion show?
But I was thinking today, how much would they have had to let that jacket out to accommodate Vogelbach on this roster? Like I was...
Wow, Jen, what the hell?
Going from the Vogie version to the Biggio version, it'd be like Monster Stretch Fry, right?
Well, because they said
they have to have two jackets. They have to have two
tailored
jackets.
it for the largest player on the team at the time. So
Danny
I'm just
Burgers.
saying.
Emphasis on the
Maybe he
burgers.
just throws it around like a smock. Carries it like a cape. Maybe
That's why they went
cape
with
on
the-
the red carpet.
Yeah, that's why they went with the carpet. Is just one size fits all, right? There you go. Juan, what is the grounds crew saying on it? Anything?
Yeah, not a lot of traffic, but it doesn't seem like anybody's overly that excited. Mark Ryan just said Jen went there, which we love. Entertaining. Yeah, it doesn't seem like... I think there needs to be more, and I think everybody in the grounds crew would agree. You know, it's a fun premise and a fun idea, but it's not enough.
I honestly think the only real objection to the home run jacket, and I would feel this way about any home run celebration, is when you're down 8-0 and hit a solo shot in the 9th inning, maybe don't do the celebration, right? I think that's
a hockey term, garbage time.
Yeah, like I think that's maybe the only time when people really were kind of like, that's a bad look. But other than that, I say come up with something absolutely ridiculous, you know? Figure that out.
I love it.
Make that what you do on your next plane ride on your next, road trip.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal. Vote it out, right? We actually talked about this a lot on the show about things. What is that catalyst? What brings the team together? And honestly, we were talking about sometimes it's just a stupid gesture that brings the team together.
A home run sausage.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes, and it banes Carlos Santana in the head after having too many of them.
Okay, so we are going to switch gears here to talking George Springer. This is, I don't like framing it this way, but this is just how my brain has been working the last week. I am in a more negative mood than normal, but is George Springer washed? Or is there a way to steal the premise from Moneyball with David Justice? Can we squeeze the last bit of baseball out of him that can contribute to this team? And is he prepared to be a team enough player to do that? And yes, moving down in the lineup was great to see. However, I do question why it took so long. And we've even seen a little bit more life out of him with moving it down. So let's start with you, Jen, because I am curious on just in general your thoughts on the importance of the batting order in general, and if it does get overblown sometimes. I know that there's been a lot of people talking about it over the last few weeks as the Jays are so ice cold offensively. And on top of that, just George Springer in general, where you're at on him, if you do see the potential for a resurrection of some kind, even if he has to really change the type of player he is.
I think I think it took so long to move him down in the lineup because of what they're paying him.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really hard to take that big money player and say, you're not the guy. And so that's why I think it took so long. I think they were trying to, hoping beyond hope that he would figure it out and turn it around. And that hasn't happened. And so, they're at a point where change was necessary. And I don't know how much the lineup genuinely matters. But I do think you obviously want the guys that are hitting the ball or getting on base to be at the top of the lineup, right? You want them getting the majority of the at-bats. And with Springer coming out there, far too often, there's one out before you know it. And, that simply doesn't set the tone, right? Is he washed? I think he's washed in terms of what the player that he was at his peak. Absolutely. I think he is going to have to reinvent himself. His defense is still excellent. Right. So he's still, as he's very serviceable within, in the outfield, and you don't want to necessarily take his glove out of a game, but my God, he definitely needs to figure out, how he can contribute offensively, because with a team struggling for offense, they need every ounce that they can get. And I don't know exactly what he's going to do.
And it is interesting because, and I'll throw to you here, Juan, as the outsider looking at George Springer, obviously 34 years old now, a shadow of what he was as a Houston Astro. And we've seen guys age before out of the type of player they were and then reinvent themselves. I know Joey Votto comes to mind. Paul Goldschmidt comes to mind. There's a man who just has reinvented himself 3 different times in his career, right? Does George Springer, looking at the Blue Jays and what they desperately need, which is power, he's a guy who has hit 30-plus bombs numerous times throughout his career. I know it's easy to say, and of everyone in this panel, you're probably the best to answer it because you played baseball, at least at a semi-high level. How hard is it to be okay, I'm going to hit more dingers? Is there...
Contract too, and he was part of the cheating ass. Right, so there was actually somebody in the chat that's just he puts on 20 pounds and just becomes a power hitter, and at his advanced age, it's tough, especially, and that's the thing, right? Playing the outfield, especially at Rogers Center, is hard on the body. We've heard that all the time. Kevin Pillar was a massive voice around the harsh ground that they use at that stadium. So I think that wears down players' bodies a lot more than we realize, and I think it happened to Springer, especially to see the drop off happen so drastically so quickly. If he's willing to reinvent himself and turn himself into that player and understand that he's not the same player he was, it's tough, but it's the only way. It's either going to be that or he's going to get bought out of his contract because he can't keep playing the way he is playing. And if you get a chance to slot him into the DH as a full-time DH, and maybe he can reinvent himself and become, I don't want to say David Ortiz because that would be way too generous, but that kind of makeup of a player would not be in the realm of impossibility, in my opinion.
For the record, I believe Kevin Pillar is having a more successful season right now than George Springer.
I would believe that.
He actually just got his,
I'm pretty sure.
He just got his 1,000th hit today too.
Hell yeah.
So there was that. That was actually hot off the presses.
This is wild, actually. Let's talk Kevin Pillar just really, really quickly here, all right? Because he just stole his 100th base. He has hit just last year. He hit his 100th home run. He just hit his 1,000th hit. Like, this is a guy also very David Schneider-esque in, late round draft pick. Like, I think he was in the 400th overall. But my God, what a career that man has wound up carving out for himself. A major contributor on those 2015, 2016 World ALCS teams with the Blue Jays. Then he went to San Francisco and put in 2 really good years there where all of a sudden he hit 20 bombs each year, which, and 2019, and even this, I even had a rant at a point where I was like, how juiced do the balls need to be? Like, do we need Kevin Pillar hitting 20 home runs? But nonetheless, still a very impressive career. Craig, can you speak a little to Kevin Pillar and just what you remember from him in his Blue Jays era?
Well, every team needs a player like Kevin Pillar at the end of the day. Or I'll bring out a couple other random names here from past that are Marco Scuderos, your Reed Johnsons. Everybody needs that grinding guy on the lineup, right? Kevin Pillar is one of those guys that, even at his age that he is right now, has found a way to be that guy and fill a niche for any baseball team he has happened to be on. When he came up, remember, he was playing left field that Jackie Robinson day when he debuted really and got up to actually steal a job for the Blue Jays there that first season. So made that crazy catch on left field where he went all the way up the wall and then really solidified his spot in this lineup for years to come. But like I said, you need that role player guy, and he's done that in spades. And a lot of those guys that are in that role playing ballpark don't do what you just said with the 100 home runs, the 100 stolen bases, the 1,000 hits, those kind of things. Those are guys that don't happen like that all the time. That's that next level, that he was a good player for an extended period of time and then became that role player. And I know you and Juan were talking about the what a player has to constantly do to retool, because this is a game of adapting, and otherwise you just don't survive in this game. He's found a way to do that, and he's found a way to do it quickly in a spring training where he can jump into a team and help out. What he's doing in LA right now is slightly crazy to that point where he's been 323 with 4 home runs. But
which would be ahead of George Springer right now.
Correct. Exactly. But to that point, I played baseball extended up into college too, and it's just one of those things that you don't become that guy overnight. So you got to have some way of retooling and doing that. And that's the difference between people like me that fizzle out in Division III baseball in college, and somebody like Kevin Pillar that can go all day, every day and still find a way to play at the age of 35, 36, I think. So, but I want to make an interesting tidbit about the George Springer piece. Have you all seen what his other 2 teammates have been doing at all for this season from those years, the banging on the trash cans and the Astros? I'm looking at Carlos Correa and Alex Bregman, who also can't hit their way out of a brown paper bag right now.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a little bit more systemic, but I don't know. I just thought it was really odd that all 3 of those guys are having bad seasons.
Bregman surprises me on his contract year. Not to bring fantasy baseball into this, but I took him pretty high in fantasy draft because I was just like, oh, yeah, this is going to be Bregman's year. right? You always see
trolling the
those
bottom like
contract
me right now?
guys. Yeah, that's right. And now I'm like, oh man,
There is some
fastballs coming.
there is some chatter about potentially trading for Kevin Pillar as a bench piece for the Blue Jays in the chat. And I will say Pillar was actually one of my favorite Blue Jays to watch. And ironically enough, he is the reason I hate Kevin Kiermaier of all people.
Yeah, me too.
Which is so ironic now that he's with the Blue Jays. But I wanted Pillar to get gold gloves,
Why not
right?
put
And
them together?
Kiermaier would not allow it.
Say, it would be
not put them
amazing
together?
for Pilar and Kiermaier to finally play together.
Yeah.
You know, runner up of Gold Gloves all those years, Kevin Pilar with Gold Glove winner Kevin Kiermaier. There you go. I mean, if we're
that'd be
gonna
funny.
if this is going to just be a shit team, like fine. Go get
Have some
Kevin.
fun with it.
Yeah, bring up Joey Votto, bring in Kevin Pilar. Let's act like it's 2017 and we're still holding on to 2016. I don't know. Like
Let's remarket it the Beer League Blue Jays and just bring in fan favorites.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Jesse Barfield back in center, playing right.
Well, to that point,
Yeah.
even one of our friends became a DFA today, and Jay Jackson.
I
Oh.
saw that.
I didn't
saw
see
that.
that.
So
I will say, I did see that, and this is a thought I had right away of just go grab him. I mean, he did so well under Pete Walker and with the Jays. I know he has a 7 ERA with the Twins. I was kind of surprised to see him with a 7 ERA and look at his whip, and it's like 1.3. Like, it's not even an insane whip. He's
looked pretty good against us a weekend ago.
he did. But I mean, we are so good at making pitchers look good. So I wouldn't read too much into that. But Craig, would you be interested in a Jay Jackson on a minor league deal? We stash him in AAA and see what happens. I mean, it's depth. This bullpen, it's not like they're lighting the world on fire.
No, I wouldn't even think about it. If I can get him back in one way or the other, what do you got to lose at this point? To your point, like if you bring him back on a minor league contract, you know he can do well in Toronto. We saw it last year, and honestly, we all kind of agreed. I think that he kind of got at the end, he got snubbed a little bit. So give him a chance to come back into this bullpen and really have a chance to shine again. Because right now with our bullpen, I'm sure all of you agree, it's next man up one way or the other right now.
It's not a good bullpen. It has been incredibly disappointing, which, you know, I don't think is too huge of a surprise. But, you know, I said a week or two ago that I think at the deadline it'll be unless they decide to be sellers. I think it's going to be such an underwhelming trade deadline that they'll add just a bullpen piece and call it a day. So why not add that bullpen piece now? Like you said, put them in the minors and it's next man up. You know, Pearson isn't getting it done. And oh my God, his name isn't coming to me right now. But, you know, why not? Why not get him?
Let me ask you this, and I would love to get like just a yes or no answer from all three of you as Jays people. And I don't know if it's possibility based on his contract, but it was recommended in the chat to option Pearson and put Jackson on the major league roster. Yay or nay?
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah, flip a coin. I mean, and which does show you where we're all at with Nate Pearson. This is a kid who was touted as a top pitcher in all of baseball, right? Highest ranked starting pitcher, according to Baseball America. When the Jays finally did bring him up, I mean, he was doing interviews with MLB.com about being in the Hall of Fame. Like, the hype behind this arm. I mean, there was his pitching, his college pitching coach came out and said he thought he could hit 112 miles an hour, right? Like, this is a kid who was throwing 106. And I just get the feeling that he never learned how to pitch. He relied on the gas all along, fell in love with analytics, started doing the biomechanics stuff, getting all of like too much information, you know? And I think I talked about this with Julia Cruz when I had her on the show, and just like, is there such thing as too much information, and kind of brought up the Seattle Mariners pulling the iPads from the dugout, right? When they were struggling offensively. And
Still
She
are,
said
but-
absolutely there's too much information. And I think we all are aware of that. So I do wonder if Nate Pearson is a kid that, like, I wonder if he'll ever put it together at this point.
He relied entirely on velocity, and like you said, to your point, never really learned how to pitch, and then had so many setbacks that, you know, he's never actually been able to, you know, put anything together mechanically. And then I also wonder, I don't know what the mentality is there either, right? It's difficult to know. Does he have the mentality to be able to pitch at this level and succeed at this level? And the truth is that we don't know. And I think that they've put their faith in him long enough. I think the experiment is over.
I wonder a little bit about how much this is all speculation. I have no background knowledge of this, but it feels like to me there are players on this team who have quote unquote checked out. And I was thinking this before Kevin Gausman came out, but after Kevin Gausman was interviewed, it kind of rung through my head what he said, which was, we need to be fiery more often. And I mean, that's a real soft way of saying, pull your heads out of your asses. Let's get in these games. Why are we floating when we're so far behind? And I don't know if that's how he meant it, but I am curious. Craig, I'll go to you here. When you heard Kevin Gausman talk like that, what was your initial reaction? And do you feel like there's guys who are floating on this team? Do you feel like there are players who have maybe checked out and it's mid-May and that's concerning?
I think I actually sadly saw somebody in the chat mentioning that Bo Bichette might be in that ballpark already. But to that point, I can't believe that Major League Baseball players would be that, but I'm going to give you the Anthony Rendon situation with that gentleman in spring training with, I will say, the worst interview in sports I've ever seen in my life. That he shows up here for a paycheck. He comes here for his family. He doesn't give a crap if he wins or loses or anything. He's here to walk out. It reminded me of it's like Major League 3, those guys that were on the Minnesota Twins that end up getting beat by the Buzz in the minor leagues. So I hope that's not true. I hope that's a falsism, but he might be to that point where he's stating that they need to be more often, because there's guys that are just riding every once in a while and they're not getting that kick when they need to be getting the kick to, you know, take a lead away or hammer things down to hold on to a lead like we've seen, unfortunately, over the last week. You guys look at the record, what we could be in the midst of how many games we've blown in the last, 4 or 5 innings. This is a 500 team at that point, right? You're not missing it by much, but there is some lack of urgency, some piece. Maybe it's just holding somebody accountable, that, to Gausman's point there, that is the difference between them being a extremely mediocre Major League Baseball team with a high payroll or a good team with a good payroll at that point.
So my question is, who on this team do you think would hold players accountable?
That was what I was thinking earlier. Like I said, you're missing
Gausman.
that Shea Hillenbrand.
Right? Like, Gausman's comments were not the first from a starting pitcher, right? I believe Chris Bassett has also said, in fewer words, something quite similar, right? Not exactly pointing the finger at the offense, but pointing the finger at the offense, right? Yeah, these guys are the problem.
It's getting frustrating.
Right,
Correct.
Exactly. That was what it was. And so,
End quote, walks away.
right, that's much fewer words to get the same point across. And
He wants to get back to beaver hunting on that one commercial I keep seeing, or the beaver dam.
And it's difficult to tell because we can't see the work that they're putting in, right? We can't see what they're doing after the game. Like, are they just getting dressed and going home? And
Luckily, Jen, Ross Atkins was there for us to tell us how hard they are working. He's incredibly impressed with their work ethic.
yeah, I do remember him saying that yesterday. We just have
And
to
dig
be
the grave a
patient.
little deeper.
Bo has been playing and has wanted to be this guy his entire life, right? And knows that he's extremely talented and at some point is likely in for a big payday. So you would like to think that he wouldn't check out, but it looks like he's checked out, and so that's the difference, right? Is I have absolutely no idea, but the optics aren't good.
Scott, this is where I was selfishly wanting Joey Votto on this team earlier in the year, because I think he was the one that came back into the Reds dugout last year and got them going a little bit. And this exact mantra that we're talking about here, he didn't have to light up the scoreboard, but he got everybody else going, because he is one of those accountability guys. And you can see that in just his interviews and stuff when he's talking from previous years with the Reds. But it's sort of been a new locker room too. I don't know if it would have been the same story or not.
Juan, what's your first impressions when you hear a guy like Kevin Gausman, $110 million dude, the ace of this Blue Jays staff, come out and say, more or less, guys, pull your heads out of your ass?
Yeah, I mean, like, he's probably one of the most veteran players on that roster, other than, Springer. I don't know their ages, but Kevin's been around a long time. Baltimore, San Francisco, and now Toronto, right? So that's a guy that you got to listen to. There's a reason he's the ace of your staff. He's been doing it a long time, and he's a guy that wants to win. He didn't sign that contract and come into Toronto chasing money. I mean, he got a good contract, and obviously that played a major factor, but he was coming to win. He signed that free agent contract thinking that, Bo is here, Vladdy's here, they got good things going, Sprinter's performing when he signed that contract.
Bassett, same thing, I get the feeling.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, even Barrios re-upping like he did, like, these are
100%.
I think it's part of the reason why the starting staff is so good is that they
Agreed.
are there to win, right?
Yeah. I think like, it's one thing to struggle and that's fine, but then to see, the offense or the rest of the roster not take that struggle seriously, or not, do everything absolutely possible, whether it's, bunt for a base hit and slide into first base head first, like little things like that. And I know you're not supposed to for injury purposes and whatever else, and your best asset is being available, but little things like that show that you're trying, right? And I don't see it from the Blue Jays offense right now. And it's got to be frustrating. These guys obviously are making a lot of money to perform and to compete, and when you're as competitive as a guy like Kevin Gausman is, to see your teammates not pull their weight or put in the effort that's necessary to be a championship caliber team like he thought he was coming to, I'd be pissed off too, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the AL East and just talk this division for a second. The New York Yankees won again today. That's 7 in a row now. They are currently 33-15. Juan Soto is having one of the best contract years, going to free agency type of things that I've seen in forever. And he's 26. Yankees fans are falling in love with this guy. And if the Yankees win, I honestly didn't see Soto as a guy who would fall for New York, right? Like, I always thought he would go to the money right out of the gate, and he is still going to, but they might be able to keep Soto long term there in pinstripes. And he just has been incredible for that team. You look at the Orioles, and they're only a couple games back of the Yankees. They're keeping pace. They're on pace for well over 95 wins again this season. Even the Rays, have made up ground after running through us like they did. And then you look at the Red Sox, and the Red Sox are one game under 500, but the Red Sox have been a much better team than I expected them to be. And I think that they're actually probably an above 500 team by the end of this season, which I hate to say, because where that puts us, which is dead last in this division. I don't really have a pivot point here or a positive spin outside of Jen. When you look at these New York Yankees, do you get the feeling they're real? Like, this is the Yankees, and this is what we can expect? Just a buzzsaw the rest of the year?
Before the show, I pulled up 2 tweets just to give some numbers, just to have as a quick reference. So I think this is since April 27th. Aaron Judge is batting .389 with 9 home runs, a .516 on-base percentage, and .889 slugging percentage with 60 total bases. So that's what
Okay.
that's
One of my
what Judge
fantasy
has
team's
been
doing well.
How does his numbers compare with the Blue Jays' total numbers? Like, I don't
Right?
even want to see it side by side.
And then moving along,
Not quite telling.
Giancarlo Stanton now has a 139 WRC plus in 2024. The last full season he played where it was that high was in his historic 2017 season, where he hit 59 home runs. Stanton might have a career year as a Yankee in 2024 at age 34. And so to go back to what Soto is doing, well, no. To go back to what Soto is doing.
Just go back to the other guy.
Right? It's like, first, when you have, this is what I said last week, right? They have all guys clicking right now. And that's how you go off and win 8 in a row.
Yes,
right?
right.
So, cool that Vlad has gotten hot as of late, but if nobody else does, then it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate into wins when only one guy can get hot, right? And that's what's going so well. Not that the Yankees weren't going to be a great team this season, but that's what's happening over there. And when you have these dangerous hitters that everybody fears to face, even when they're in a slump, all clicking at the same time, they each make the other hitter better.
So this is some stats that I saw over the weekend that really were eye-popping to me. And this is just to ride off what you just gave for info on what the New York Yankees are doing power-wise. So the current projected 2024 home run totals for the Toronto Blue Jays, Varsho would lead the way with 26, which is right where we want him to be. Literally, when they got him out of Arizona, they were like, he hit 27 in Arizona. They're like, if he can do that here, fantastic. That's great. That's all we need Dalton Varsho to do. And his ability to play small ball when no one else can is also very impressive. He's also just a really smart ball player. You watch him pick up little things like when they're just not paying attention, he'll lay a bunt down. He does those little things. Dalton Varsho, nothing against him giving us 26 home runs. My pushback is, why the hell is Dalton Varsho leading the way for home runs? The next guy projected for home runs totals in 2026 would be Davis Schneider with 19.
Mm-hmm.
You know where Vladdy sits? 15 home runs. I just want to put in perspective how insane that is. 48 home runs in 2021, 36 in 2022. 32 in 2022, 26 last year. And I didn't think, honestly, and I mean this, I thought 26 was the low water mark we'd ever see out of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for home runs. And now it's looking like he's going to have to get hot to hit 20. Danny Jansen's on pace for 15, and he hasn't played all of April. George Springer's on pace for 11. Bo Bichette is on pace for 8. Like, no fucking wonders this team sucks.
Exactly.
Well, and a home run is how you put runs on the board quickly, right?
It gives you the opportunity to come back when you're down by 4.
Yep.
And that's something that this team just doesn't have. And this is the perfect transition to talk a little bit about the Mariners and what they're doing, because the Blue Jays have made it so that if they win, the margin for error is almost nothing. And we've watched it be the downfall of this team. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, the Seattle Mariners are doing the exact same thing we are, but succeeding while doing it.
Doing it better.
Doing it so much better. All pitching, all defense. I know, Juan, you texted me this stat, and I'll just throw to you to go ahead and give it and talk a little bit of what's going on in Seattle right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Mariners this season right now are 23-6 when scoring 3 runs or more. You hope you can get that out of your team 95% of the time. 3 runs, it doesn't. I don't know, but I feel the same frustrations on the offensive side for sure. I mean, Julio Rodriguez is a perfect example. He is the most frustrating 275 batting average hitter this year, I swear to God, because the average is not bad. You look at 275, and I think majority of the league, with maybe the exception of Soto, would take that coming into the season and be okay with it. But the power is awful. His on base percentage is like 320 and his slugging percentage is like 335. Like that's bad, right? And so he's probably on pace to put up, power numbers similar to Bo this year. And it's just not going to cut it as guys that are supposed to be faces of the franchise. And you're playing a dangerous game. I mean, we saw this series with Baltimore. Holy fuck, that roster is good, man. Top to bottom, defense, pitching, offense. Like, you guys are in a hell of a division. And New Brunswick, Canada guy made a good point and said, the Yankees and Orioles might win 110 games both this year, which is crazy because they got to play each other in the same division. I would love to check with our research team to see if there's ever been two teams in the same division with 110 wins. We don't have a research team, but if we did, we'd throw it over to them. Maybe
crew, look it up.
Yeah, check it out. Let me know if that's a thing. I do think that it's possible that the Mariners and the Athletics in the early 2000s had that potentially. It maybe just be 100, but not 110. So you either gotta go all in or solve the problem offensively, right? And for us, it's continuing to invest in pitching and defense. And if you guys want to continue to throw us reclamation bullpen products, we'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
Thornton, Saucedo, Sneed. And then Nate Pearson is right in line to come over and do filthy things for
Seattle
us.
Mariner next year. That's right.
You guys DFA him. We'll pick him up. I'll tell you what. We'll even give you like a top 20 prospect for Nate Pearson because I have no doubt in my mind that he would be a lights out setup pitcher in the Mariners bullpen. I don't know why it is, but you look at Sauce, you look at Snead, you look at Thornton. Thornton's phenomenal this year. And Saucedo was too before he went down at first base. So
even Snead minus that last outing was literally, I'm like watching Kirby, and I mean he's a friend of the show, so of course I'm rooting for him.
Of course,
but we all know where Kirby Snead lies on the depth charts with the Mariners, which is depth, right?
It's depth.
For him to come up and literally be completely lights out. And it's just been so interesting to talk to these guys about the way the Mariners go about talking to their pitchers. And listen, I give all the credit in the world to Pete Walker. It's just interesting to see how different personalities and different people respond to different ways of doing things. And I think it's great for these guys like Thornton and Saucedo and Snead who have gone to the Mariners, and they've just seemed to unlock the best out of them.
Yeah. We had somebody in the chat too also comment on Julian Merriweather and how they'd be closing for the Cubs right now too if he wasn't hurt, right? So that's a lot of arms, and to see that you guys is like one of your guys' major issues right now in this year's bullpen, to see all these arms be so successful in other places. It almost makes you think that you got to look internally. Pete Walker has done some great things, and I know him as a pitching coach that has done a lot of incredible things for sure. But maybe it is time for a refresh, and that doesn't just necessarily mean the roster or the front office, but it could mean the coaches on the bench as well. You may need a new voice in there.
That is really interesting, and I will throw to you for that, Craig, because everyone always talks about if this winds up being a rebuild. And fingers crossed that if it is, there is a new voice and a new mind at the helm of this Toronto Blue Jays organization. And everyone says, fire everyone, keep Pete Walker. But I do wonder if maybe that's just a ridiculous way of thinking of things, and that's obviously not how stuff works, especially in a corporate structure, right? It's not like, oh, one guy gets to keep his job. So, Craig, do you think that if this does wind up being a rebuild and they do go with someone else, I was going to give a name, but someone else, do you think we could see this full coaching staff be completely turned over, Pete Walker included?
I'm shocked that Pete Walker stuck around when Montoyo got fired. I'm just going to be. I'm glad he did, but I was really surprised. And I was actually, funny enough, I looked this up recently to see when the last time I wrote a baseball article was, and that was when it was that basically Pete Walker was the one left holding the bag when Montoya, that following season and everything. And so I was shocked. And but to that point, right now, I don't. If somebody's going to get fired, it's going to be John Schneider. That's just how it always ends up being. It doesn't matter what it is. They're not going to turn around and fire Ross Atkins until the season's over. And that's the thing that honestly scares me the most. And just like many of you, why should he get to be the one that starts a rebuild if he's not going to be coming back at all? This is, I'll just go back to, the last time we were, seriously contending in 2015, 2016. Shapiro put Alex Anthopoulos on blast for trading everything that was in our minor league organization to go for it in 2015, and that he was quote unquote left holding the pieces to try figuring out how this team could be good again. And right now, that's what somebody else could be doing in this situation where they trade. We all love Roy Halladay, but look at that trade. We got nothing. We got the promise of Kyle Drabeck being something phenomenal, and then we kept hoping Anthony Gose was going to be the next best center fielder in Major League Baseball history. It's not going to happen. He's actually a better reliever, I think, than he was a center fielder at any time. So you're hoping and praying that a management team that has not consistently traded well. They've done a good job of bringing in good talent through free agency, but they have not been the best of trade records. To what Juan was saying, with every young talented gentleman that we let out the door, it seems to be the next best thing for random bullpens and whatnot, especially the Mariners. So what else do you do in that whole thing? I just think if you're going to be any kind of a teardown, that Atkins is gone and Shapiro needs to take the thing, because he's the only one that should be left around at this, and I don't think that's the best thing either.
And that does what it is what scares me, and I know that this is a genuine concern amongst quite a few Blue Jays fans, is that they constantly talk collaboration. I mean, it's a word at this point that just, I hear it and I'm triggered by it. This is how much this word has been pounded into us as a fan base since Shapiro and Atkins took over. We're collaborative. Nobody is at the helm. This is a group effort. And the one thing about
just like the dugout.
Just like the dugout. The one thing about groupthink that worries me is that when you're talking about a group running things, it's easy to convince each other that you are on the right path. And I think it's why we constantly hear you got to trust the process, because everyone starts to truly believe it, because they have all built this team together and none of them want to look at this at like some of this has been a failure. And my real concern here is that Shapiro is part of that. I mean, and if that's the case, even if Ross Atkins is fired, which at that point, he's just a lamb to the slaughter. And then what clown is just hopping back on this merry-go-round? And I really hope this is not the case. Okay. Like I know this is a kind of a dark outlook of like, even if we rebuild, we're still screwed because we got the same guys at the helm. I do hope that Shapiro will give it a different look, right? Let go of Atkins and let someone else take the helm. And if you are going to get some of those top guys out there, I know one is in the organization, World Series winner from 2022, James Click. Kim Ang's name is out there. If you're going to get one of those premium general managers that are out there, you're probably going to need to give some autonomy and allow them to make the decisions. Jen, do you think Shapiro has it in him to do that? Has he shown anything in the past that would convince you, and we can even go to Cleveland, is there anything in his past that convinces you that maybe he will let go of this whole collaborative idea?
Everything that I've heard about Shapiro and Atkins is that they are a package deal. And that's coming from people that spend a lot of time with this organization. So I don't know for a fact that Shapiro has it in him to fire Atkins, fire the coaching staff. I really don't. Just based on every single thing that so many people around that team have said about their working relationship. And I don't see ownership necessarily firing Shapiro because I think he's done the aspect of the job that they've hired him to do. So I really don't know exactly where this is going to go. Back to your comment about, the collaborative process, meaning that everybody buys into the groupthink. The other problem with the collaborative process is that no one takes responsibility. That's the biggest problem. Nobody takes responsibility for what is going on, what is wrong. They can all, hey, when it's going right, but when things are going wrong, oh, well, we all did it together, da. And that's where I think the real problem lies right now, because, who do you even point to at this point, right? Is it the analytics department and too heavy of a reliance on the analytics? Are they not analyzing the analytics well? Is it the hitting coaches and their approach? Like, what exactly is going wrong? And, it really does all come down to Ross Atkins, in the sense that he's the one who put together the team on the field. This is his, set of coaches. This is who he's decided to hire and or retain. John Schneider is who he picked to be on the bench. Don Mattingly, yada, yada, yada. And, the past two off seasons, when they got bounced from the playoffs, especially last season, Atkins says, the responsibility, lies with him. It ends with him. So I really think, to your point, he absolutely cannot be the one in charge of if there is a rebuild, he cannot be the one who is around. And if you're bringing somebody else in, then I agree. They're probably going to want to pick their own coaching staff. And while Pete Walker has done tremendous things, you say
and will have a job instantly. Exactly.
You say Kikuchi alone is miraculous right now. But I don't think that necessarily buys him, a future with this team if the general manager changes.
Juan, I'm curious, when you look at the Mariners organization, how does that work structurally? Do you get the feeling like Jerry DiPoto's making the calls? Yes. And do you get the feeling Scott Service is autonomous on the field and can kind of make his obviously, I know where baseball is in 2024. I know that a manager still is going he's still listening to the analytics team, which every organization has. He still has all the information. He's still got a wide range of coaches, both mental and, the whole thing, there's the mental department and all of that, right? Like, I'm aware every organization has that. But when you look at the difference between the Blue Jays and the Mariners, do you feel like the guys in charge of the Mariners do have a little bit more say in what they do?
Yes and no. I mean, I really like Jerry DiPoto. He's in that Mark Shapiro role now. And then we got Hollander in that Atkins role. And they actually work pretty well together, in my opinion, to be honest with you. I'm okay with those guys. I'm okay with the roster construction. They've drafted pitching really, really well. They've identified, bullpen arms that they can reclaim.
You're going to throw player development in our face.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just know it's something that y'all struggle with a little, which is unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but it is something that they have excelled at. And you look at the Mariners rotation, 4 out of the 5 guys, or even 5 out of the 6 guys, if you include Emerson Hancock, were homegrown drafted players by the Mariners. So I think the front office is doing what they can. And it's one of the best rotations in all of MLB, to be homegrown and not have to go out and spend money to create that is a massive
Logan
boom.
Gilbert's your number 3. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And he's an ace on, a lot of teams. He's really, really
25
good.
teams. He's the number
at
one.
least, he's a dude that has Cy Young potential, and you're right, 2 or 3, 2A or 2B guy right now. With that being said, I don't like Scott Service personally. I think he is a terrible manager. I know that that's not necessarily the common belief around Major League Baseball. But this is a guy that's been in that position for 9 years and has only taken the team to the playoffs once. at the end of the day, there's more than enough track record to prove that he's not the guy. So when it comes to management, I would love to see somebody else in there. I don't know who that is, to be honest with you, but you go 9 seasons and make one playoff game or one playoff series and win one playoff series or two. Thank you so much, Toronto. There's not a lot to show for it, and there's just a lot of suspect decision making in terms of in-game decisions that I question that I'm not great with. There was a game early in the season where Julio Rodriguez was struggling. He was given the day off. The Mariners were down by 2, if I'm not mistaken. It was 1 or 2 runs they were down by, and runner on first base, and they actually pinch ran Julio Rodriguez at first base instead of pinch hit him, which is like, this is the face of your franchise. Whether he excels or not and does the job, like, we're going to run him and not pinch hit him is crazy to me. There was other bench options.
It's backwards.
It's so silly to me. And it's shit like that he does almost frequently, at least once a week, where you're like, what the fuck are we doing? And I think that can
sure
be
you're not a Blue
difference.
Jays fan?
Yeah, right? It's all too similar.
The one thing all fan bases have in common is at least half of them don't like the manager.
But it comes down to decision making, right? Like Jen said, your job is to manage the bullpen and the lineup as the manager, and that's it. That's your task. You're not really coaching these guys up at practice. That's what their position players and analytics and all these other people are involved in. Your job is to make the right decisions during the game, and I don't think Scott's doing it. But with that being said, God bless Texas Rangers rotation health and the Houston Astros being a garbage fire this year, and it's allowing us to be in first place. But it's tough. It is tricky for sure.
The Astros are 8-2 in their last 10.
I know, and
Yes, they are.
It was
Yeah,
only
that's
a matter of time, and I don't want to talk about that. That wasn't our topic today, Jen.
Okay,
I got
before
an
we get
interesting
to
point.
no, go ahead, Greg, please.
We were collectively talking about who you want and maybe where some of these problems were, and Jen, to your point of having too many yes men in the room do not get anything really done at the end of the day. I've had the pleasure of talking with Ben Charrington a bunch of times for interviewing over at Jays Journal, and this is obviously when his tenure was with the Blue Jays. He didn't come out and say that, but you could definitely tell there was some little bit of like irk in the midst of that conversation amongst some of these group decisions and how they were handling some of those things. I'm wondering if there was some smoke to that actual fire, because obviously he's doing pretty damn well for himself in Pittsburgh now. And he was a general manager for the Red Sox too. So maybe that voice in the room was a little different, and then a lot of places in it told him to go out. He went away. Simple as that.
This is a perfect place to talk the Pittsburgh Pirates and Paul Skeens. So,
You're welcome. Segue points.
yeah, you're feeding me
Nicely
beach
done.
I
balls
didn't even
here,
know it was on the
Craig.
list.
Love it. Okay, so listen, we once or twice a year get somebody promoted to the big leagues that there's a ton of hype around. And this year, Paul Skeens just seems to be that guy. But rarely do you see a guy with that much hype come out and deliver quite like Skeens has. I mean, I've watched both of his starts. And if you are a fan of just pitching and baseball in general, it is must-see TV. If you get a chance to check out this guy pitch, it is absolutely incredible what this kid is doing at the age that he's doing it at the velocity he's throwing these pitches at. I mean, he was throwing stuff at literally 103 miles an hour that had run on it that looked like a breaking pitch pretty much. Like it's unhittable stuff. And that's exactly what happened. He went 6 innings against the Chicago Cubs and no hit them up until that point. And of course, the Pirates, being cautious, removed him from the game as he hit his 100 pitch limit or whatever. And, any guy that throws that kind of velo. Juan, I will start with you here. I know you've been following the Paul Skeens story as closely as anyone. What can you see out of this kid as you watch him? And do you think that the hype is warranted? Like, can you see this guy being anything but a star as long as he stays healthy and doesn't have bad tacos, knock on all the wood.
Yeah, I'm really high on this kid. I love what I've seen from him, honestly, and the hype is warranted. We saw what his numbers were in AAA, and I was banging my head against the wall just waiting for that call up. I couldn't understand why it took as long as it did, because we knew that they were going to protect his arm in that inning count this season, regardless of where he was pitching. It's not like anybody is looking at Pittsburgh as a World Series favorite, so go sell some extra tickets and start planning for the future around this kid, because he is that. His stuff is some of the best stuff I've seen from any pitcher, and consistently, not just one pitch. It's not the 103-mile-an-hour running fastball. It's the slider, it's the changeup, it's the cutter. Everything that this guy throws is incredible, and when he locates, it's unhittable. That first start was a little shaky with control. I think that's probably just a 21-year-old making his major league debut.
Making his debut.
In front of his famous girlfriend, and, accepting the fact that he is going to be the face of Pittsburgh in a bigger way than I think Garrett Cole or an Andrew McCutchen was. We talked about it last week. If there's a player that Pittsburgh is going to finally open up the coin purse for, it's got to be Skeens. And everything we've seen up to this point, even in that first start, you could see the stuff. Just because the results weren't, the outcome they were looking for. He gave up 3 runs in 4 innings, I believe. We saw the true version of him against the Cubs this last week, and I think he's going to continue to carve. He may have some dips as people start to adjust and get more film on him, but at the end of the day, 103 with that movement and that power in that body frame, he's going to, as long as he stays healthy, is a big caveat, but as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be an absolute stud in this league for a long time, and has that Hall of Fame potential for sure.
It's just exciting to see a guy pitch like that. And I know, Craig, I'll go to you here, because you look at some of the top young talent in this league, and they are getting locked up. You saw Jackson Trio with the Brewers, another small market organization, jump the gun a little bit on signing a guy, something that the Jays never, ever, ever, ever would do. At least not with this front office. They have proved it time and time again that they're not going to take any sort of adverse risk. But we're seeing Jackson Chourio play out pretty well for for the Brewers. And you know what? You look at what Ronald Acuna did in Atlanta. You look at what Julio Rodriguez is doing in Seattle. And yes, there is risk attached to all of these. However, you look at a small market team like Pittsburgh, and I know Juan just touched on it. Can you see this Pirates team, a team that is known to cheap out, a team that is known to sell off their biggest assets and their fan favorites because they just don't want to spend the money? Can you see this organization finally take that step to maybe lock a guy like Skeens up, maybe go to him next year and be like, listen, I know backload his contract and get an extra 3 years out of him? He's so young. Even if you sign him to 7 years, I mean, he's still a free agent at 28, 29. He's still going to get, as long, again, health. But as long as he stays healthy, can you see the Pirates finally taking that step?
You can see them wanting to do that because they missed out on doing that with Garrett Cole. And it's been kind of hunting them down a little bit since. But I will tell you the reason they're probably going to be optimistically cautious with that whole thing is our buddy Juan here being a Seattle fan with Julio Rodriguez. You have seen what it can do. You get a couple good years out of him, but then, okay, great. I'm not saying that Julio's having problems he's never going to overachieve, but you just unfortunately do not know the deck of cards that any of these players are going to be dealt at the end of the day. And Paul Skeens does have the profile of being a Roger Clemens, Randy Johnson-esque player for this for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which they haven't had that kind of pitcher in a long time. I think you got to go back to Doug Drabeck by the time you're really name dropping Cy Young caliber pitchers in that organization. So if you're going to try doing that, if they're going to win now, kind of like building up in the right direction, if you have a chance to lock up somebody like Skeens, you have to do it, I think. And they've already tried to do that. They already did that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they lock up Ryan Hayes and Brian Reynolds, a couple of these other guys that they're considering their core? Now you have Skeens as this next piece to that puzzle that they finally have an ace of the future that they're able to capitalize on and run with. I'd be very shocked if they don't find some way to at least buy out his arbitration years with known projectable numbers instead of the, oh my God, we got to pay him $1 bajillion. So
Yeah.
which he could demand if he does anything what we've seen in this small sample size at the major league level. I want to say one thing. Did anybody see the cool thing that happened on the Pat McAfee show with him? So after his major league debut, he was on the Pat McAfee show, and apparently he's donating to some charitable foundation $100 every strikeout. Pat McAfee said if he breaks the record for the 20 strikeouts in a game, he will donate $1 million to that same foundation.
Wow.
And
he could do it.
His second start, he nailed 14 already. So maybe some smoke to that fire, but
no, that's
but
very
I do think
cool.
they're going to find a way to lock him up.
That's very cool. And Jen, I know we talked hype and Nate Pearson and just what it did to him. And just, I mean, there's a lot of injuries that went along with, I think, where Nate Pearson is at right now. But I really do believe that the hype was a little much for the kid. Do you want to comment anything on that, just on what you've seen out of Skeens? Because it really doesn't feel like there's a chink in that armor at all when it comes to his mental ability to handle this pressure.
Agreed. At 21, stepping in and doing exactly what he's been projected to do, living up to that hype right out of the gate, definitely suggests that he is just a different breed. And, will they lock him up long term? I don't really know. It depends on whether or not they are willing to spend money and build around him, right? Because why have him and lock him up if you're not actually going to put pieces around him and try to win? So it would be great if they didn't cheap out and decided, because winning baseball makes you money, right? So it depends on I guess, where ownership's mind is at with that. But yeah, no. And this is the thing that I love about, baseball prospects that actually come up to the big leagues and hit, or like they hit the mark, is because just the excitement that it generates. It's so good for the sport, right? It's so good for the game, because everybody, regardless of who they are a fan of, will root for that, will tune in. It's like appointment viewing. And, so that's one of the exciting things about this season. Like, that's the one thing that, kind of, as I said, can grow the game, and you can generate, discussion around and excitement around.
And I know even from a Blue Jays standpoint, I remember the excitement that we all had as a fan base as Cavan and Bo and Vladdy were coming up, right? Highly touted prospects that came up and really it hit the mark. I mean, not maybe to the extent that we were hoping, but those first couple years definitely gave us hope. And 2021 was a big one for Vladdy especially. And I mean, 2022 was huge for Bo as well. We watched Bo lead the league in hits in 2021 and 2022, and there was all that excitement. And I look at the Pittsburgh Pirates and their fan base and the turmoil that they have gone through over the last, I want to say 10 years, but you could probably, the Pirates fans would probably argue it's a lot longer than that they have struggled with their team and just keeping any of their fan favorites when it comes to the players. But like Craig, you mentioned, right? They've got Brian Hayes locked in long term. They finally went out and signed Reynolds, right? They got him. You look at O'Neal Cruz at shortstop and the potential that kid has. And then you've got Jones and Skeens in the starting rotation. And you start to look at them and you're like, holy shit, which makes me bitter, because player development, you can give Atkins all the credit in the world for some of his moves and his signings, and some of his trades have been very good. But my goodness, when you just start checking the boxes on where the ball was dropped, who was the last guy outside of Davis Schneider? And you know what? I'm not even going to give credit to this organization for Davis Schneider. 28th round. Like, this is a kid that, like, literally, I feel like he just would have found it anywhere. Sometimes there's just those spark plugs and they just get it. And I know it's shitty to, like, point your finger at this organization for not doing something, and then the one that they do well, not give them credit for. I know that's shitty, but I just truly feel that way. But like, can any of you think of a guy outside of Alek Manoah, maybe? Like
I think
You're gonna
honestly,
make
we're
me
just
dive
at
on
the
the
point.
list.
We're just at the point where we don't want to give them credit for anything. I think,
and that's true. That's true.
Just
right.
because
I think
we
the
were on
bloodline is what
the
you can give them.
just
Yeah,
because
go ahead, Juan. Sorry.
yeah, just because I got the chat here and we haven't gone to it in a little while. I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Dolce Marist.
Dolchemarist.
Dolchemarist had a fun comment
God.
and said, "Remember when the Pirates acquired Chris Archer?" And I think that's hilarious because they got that one so wrong. The one time they go and try and get an arm.
Yes, they can
The
develop
Mark
players,
April
but
comment
don't
that
let
they
them
have
trade.
isn't bad either. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so everyone in the chat, thank you so very much for following along. Again, big apologies for the mess up at the beginning there. Do appreciate all of you. If you haven't hit the like button, that goes a long way. If you are watching this and haven't subscribed to the channel, that's also very much appreciated. All of you in the grounds crew really do appreciate you following along. I know most of you are regulars and here every single week, and you put up with our lack of ability when it comes to technology, and I thank you for that. Appreciate you sticking around. We're gonna get to the topics for wrapping this show up. So we do this every single week where we go around the horn of guests. I do want to thank all three of you again for being here. I know it's the long weekend. I know we had guys bail, but you three are the ones who we can count on every time here. I'll start with the outsider, because I am curious on where you're at, Juan, and your topic. For all of you watching, I know we touched on the Mariners here a little bit. The walk-off, we've got our I'll call it our sister podcast or our brother podcast, however you want to put it. Gender's a construct, so however you want to go, right? The walk-off Mariners. Subscribe and like it. Check it out. Juan does a great job. His co-host Jordy. We're actually going to be doing a baseball town in Seattle, July 6th. So the Blue Jays are in town from the 5 to the 7, and we're going to have Taylor Saucedo and Kirby Sneed as our guests on the show. Of course, former Toronto Blue Jays, current Seattle Mariners. Fingers crossed we wrangle in a Blue Jay as well and kind of complete the Captain Planet type of thing, right? Get all of the powers
That's how they
together
call some of
there.
their old roommates, man.
That's right. That's right. So that's really cool. We have tickets up. Are tickets up right now, Juan?
Tickets are live. Yeah, people can go and get tickets now. There's plenty of options, more affordable, more meet and greet. Reach out to Scott. Somebody just checked. Michael Borland, yes, Scott is running through the 6 nowadays with his woes. So you can catch him at Rogers Center all summer long, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, tickets are live and for sale now. There's a lot that we're going to do and try and make it a full fun event for people coming
So if you're
out.
going to make the trip from Vancouver, we want to have more Jays fans there than Mariners. I think it's going to be
Whoa! God, get out of my city, dog.
yeah.
Invasion
And
2.0.
And then for those of you in Toronto, I also have Baseball Town running May 30th. We are going to have Shoa Lee from Sportsnet and Jays Talk. We've got the boys from Blue Jays Today, the podcast there. Both of them are coming down, Nick and Adam. And then we were going to have Keegan Matheson. He had to drop out because he's being forced to go cover the City Connects jersey. I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but he's like, when a jersey is the most exciting thing happening with the Jays, it's not great, but he's like, I'm being forced to report it. So he's gone. He has promised he's going to come to the next one, but it does look like we got Scotty Mitchell from TSN stepping in. So show goes on. Everything should be great. Tickets are on sale right now. I will post a link for both of these shows in the comments as soon as I get a chance here. And on that, let's go around the horn here for everyone's topic. Juan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are amongst all this marketing and pressure to be the face of the franchise for these young superstars. You know, Skeens is 21. Julio, I believe, was 21 when he came up. Vladdy, similar situation. Bo was super young. And I remember when I was that age, I couldn't be held responsible for anything, let alone, you know, being the face of this multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar franchise. Do you guys think the pressure that comes from outside of the game and everything involved with being the face of the franchise affects these players' products on the field? And I'll throw it to Craig.
I guess I'll go first. Isn't this exactly what Alek Manoah was literally just talking about in his interview after his first start that he had success in a million years? That all the quote unquote noise was what really was causing all those problems, even though he might have caused some of that noise.
Like, stop banging on the pan.
You never want to hear them say that. Give them the benefit of the doubt, but don't tell me that.
Go ahead and pick that up, Jen, if you want to run with it. I was just bringing that up as I think it's the same thing.
I think it's dependent on each individual and their mental makeup, right? Like, some people naturally thrive under pressure and other people don't necessarily. And, you know, they've all been under pressure, I guess, their entire careers. But, you know, for the ones that are touted to be the face of the franchise, in all likelihood, they haven't hit too many snags along their career, right? They've been the best at every level along the way. And so when they do get to the major leagues and they are facing, you know, better pitching and whatnot, you know, can they handle adversity? And then I think that's really what makes the difference. You brought up Bo Bichette. You know, to me, he's really interesting because he grew up in a baseball family with a baseball dad. And I feel like, you know, of any player, he would have been well prepared to handle the stresses of being that guy. And you know, what we're seeing right now suggests that he's not handling it well. So I do wonder, you know, like I said, I think it's almost impossible to predict.
Yeah, I love this question, by the way, and you really kind of summed it up well when you're like, when I was 21, and I'm thinking back to the same thing. Like, I just was such a bonehead, and you really are putting this extreme pressure on these kids to perform, not just on the field, right? And I think that's one element of this whole face of the franchise stuff that kind of gets dropped, right? Is like, you are expected to be an exemplary human. And I like to think I work on myself all the time, but was I a shithead at 21? Like, was I a shithead at 25? Like,
are you a shithead now? Like, I mean,
none of your business. But I do think that what gets lost on these kids is they don't understand these expectations until they're in the thick of it. And so they're twisting and adjusting and trying to like figure it out. And I think that's why we're seeing so many sophomore slumps and third year slumps. And I mean, even look at Vladdy, right? I mean, Vladdy's at 25, still a kid, even though, yes, I know he should be better. And yes, he has played baseball for, you know, professional baseball for the last 5 years in the major leagues. And yes, he grew up in a baseball family. Yes, to all of this. So to look at these guys from bloodlines and realize that they have training in this shit and still struggle with it, it does give me mad respect to guys who guys like Juan Soto and this is the thing too, is no baseball player is ever perfect. Look at the heat Ronald Acuna Jr. is getting right now. He's still playing fantastic. It's just not what he did last year. And so you're just under a microscope to an extent that most early 20-somethings couldn't handle. And so I think it's why it's such an exception and such an exceptional and impressive feat when you do see guys who take that ball and run with it, guys like Juan Soto, who also, remember, like, when he was traded from Washington, he had such a bad year. Like, he really did. I mean, he was still an above average player, but he wasn't Juan Soto, right? Like, he wasn't the guy that we watched win a World Series and lead the team with the Nationals in 2019. So I don't know. I think that it's an interesting question, and I do think it's something that fan bases everywhere should be a little bit more cognizant of before they rain down booze on these 23, 24-year-old kids who, for the most part, are doing their best, right? Like, I guarantee, like, from a Jays perspective, Vladdy doesn't want to fail.
No, of course.
You know?
And the grounds crew actually made a good point on this topic and saying, you know, it's beneficial if they can come in and be the second or third guy, you know, still be the face of the franchise, but not be the guy, right? And I think we actually, and you would have to check my math and science on this one, but I think Soto actually had that with Bryce Harper in Washington, if I'm not mistaken, right? He didn't have to come in and be the face because Harper was already there. So he could just grow in. And Turner, right? Yeah. So he could just go and be himself without having to worry about carrying the entire, you know, franchise, organization, offense, whatever, right? Where, you know, not everybody is afforded this privilege. So, you know, maybe have
same
somebody.
Sort of thing, right? Acuna, same sort of thing. I mean, my goodness, when he was injured in 2021, the Braves still won a World Series on the back of Freddie Freeman, right? So, like, I think that's a great point by the grounds crew and something that not every organization has the privilege of offering their young superstar faces of the franchise.
Does anybody have a guess on when maybe we had the last time we actually had a proper passing of the torch there? I was thinking it had to have been Delgado to Vernon Wells.
I was going to say Delgado.
That long ago, where you've actually had something in that ballpark where you had a young up-and-coming player that you had a proper handoff with somebody going out the door.
Another good example from the grounds crew is Trout was that guy for Ohtani. The grounds crew coming through good right there on that one too. There's some to be said in that logic and having somebody to carry the weight of the organization and not rely on a kid that just had his first legal beer in the United States of America to do so, you know.
Well, and not that he was a face of the franchise, but Marcus Semien took an awful lot of pressure off of Bo Bichette, right?
Yes.
And, you know, clearly, you know, one had an impact on the other. And, you know, you could argue that maybe with his pedigree, George Springer being paid all that money to come in, you know, may have been coming in to kind of be that senior leader, you know, face of the franchise, big money man, take some of the pressure off. And that just simply hasn't panned out.
Yeah. I'll give you points, Jen, on Semien there because he might have been that guy to call out some people in the dugout if he was in this dugout still.
Absolutely. 100% he would.
Who would have thought that we signed the wrong 31-year-old to $150 million?
Story of the Jays.
Story of the Jays. And on that, we will go to you, Jen. What is your topic for today?
It's a related two-parter. So, All-Star break is approximately 2 weeks before the trade deadline. Am I right, roughly? Mm-hmm. Where do the Jays have to be at the All-Star break for them to say, we have a shot at the wild card and we're going to build? And if they're not at that point, and they're sellers, are they retooling or are they rebuilding? And does this fan base and does ownership actually have the stomach for a full rebuild?
I'll jump in because I think that's a great question. And I think they have to look at it and say, okay, how many teams are between us and the wild card spot? Do we think we can compete with the teams that are going to be in the playoffs? And if the answer is no, or a significant amount of teams between them, they gotta a retool is not going to do the trick. You have too many players close to expiring contracts or free agency for the first time. You got to tear it down. You have to tear it down. You're going to be able to rebuild a lot quicker. Especially if I think it's a common consensus feeling that Bo's not going to resign. You know, there's still hope for Vladdy, but there's also a possibility that, you know, he just doesn't put pen to paper. There's nothing to suggest he has to do that. He's not looking for, generational financial security. He has it already. So, if you're looking at this season as a lost cause or a bit of a wash, that it's going to be too difficult to get back into the race, you got to tear it down now. You have to do it now. You can get something for Kikuchi. You can get some for Garcia. You can get tons for Vlad and Bo. there's just a lot. You could even probably trade Gosman because I think he's going into his final year next year, if I'm not mistaken. So there is so many pieces on your roster to bring in top, young, quality talent that will reset your guys' clock a lot quicker than just retooling. That's just my opinion as an outsider, but if I'm the GM, I'm saying let's fire sale and bring in, 3 or 4 top 50 prospects with the guys that we have on our roster that could fetch us really, really strong returns in, Gosman, Kikuchi, throwing from the left side hard, and then your 2 power guys, Imbo and Vladdy. Plenty could be returned, so that would be my take.
So I am going to push back a little bit on that. I do think that there are some major moves that need to happen if they are going to rebuild / retool. My gut feeling on this is they need to be, absolutely must be, at least 5 to 10 games over 500 by the time that they get to the All-Star break. Otherwise, they need to freaking gut check and do the right thing, which is retooling. And I don't think they need to tear the walls down. I think that they've got some very good young talent under contract and under control for a little while. I would hang on to Dalton Varsho. I would fire Ross Atkins. I would fire all the coaches. I would fire Ross Atkins before the deadline, personally. I would do the old Jerry DiPoto switch in 2016 and go about it that way. I would then put James Click as the interim general manager in place, and I would fire John Schneider, but I would then also just put DeMarlo Hale in as the interim and see what happens. At that point, you got to move Bo. You absolutely have to move Bo if he's not going to resign. But part of the reason for firing Atkins is because I view it as there's probably a rift between Bo and Vlad and the front office. Not between Bo and Vlad, but the front office and our 2 core players at this point. You got to get one to sign. I don't think it's Bo. I don't think that Vladdy is a $300 million player, even close right now. I think you can probably lock him up for 4 or 5 years for $80 to $100 million. And you know what? I'm willing to take that risk on a 25-year-old Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And why wouldn't he as well consider it? Because he knows his numbers. He's not an idiot, and I guarantee he's got the best baseball background around to tell him, listen, kid, you probably got to run it back. And maybe when you hit free agency at 29, 30, there is a huge contract waiting for you. Plus $100 million, nothing to sneeze at.
There's no way that Vladdy. I could see Vladdy taking a prove-it contract or a short-term contract, much like the Boris 4. Like the Boris 4 did, 1 year plus player option, 2-3 years. Right. No way he's locking in 4 years under off a bad
turns
year.
into Juan Soto now.
Yeah, if his numbers are down, no way.
That's reasonable. Yeah. No, you're right, and I would still do that.
And that's fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah. So at that point, yes, then you got to sell on Kikuchi. Anyone who's a free agent next year, you absolutely need to go. So that's Turner, that's Garcia, that's Kikuchi. All 3 of those guys are going to have value. All 3 of those you can use to replenish your prospect pool. On the other end of things, you still have Jose Barrios in long term, and he is proven that he is excellent. So I would run with that. Manoah, at this point, I continue to let him pitch, and hopefully he gains value. I don't know if you want to move him or not, but I'm going to tell you right now, the deadline's not the time to do so. So Alek Manoah, and under a new front office, also maybe just getting rid of that might mend fences with Manoah, right? So at that point, then you do need to see where you're at in the off season and kind of feel a little bit of what you've done. And then, maybe you do need to move a Gosman. Maybe you do need to move a Bassett, who are both free agents at the end of the 2025 season. 2025 is going to suck either way. But I do think that there's a quicker turnaround on this Blue Jays team than necessarily a total teardown Kansas City Royals 8-year rebuild. I truly do believe that. I think that this can be done in 2 or 3 years where they start to really see some progress again on where they're at. I hate the idea of a full rebuild because
you're a fan.
I'm a fan.
You want to see him win
baseball forever, but this team has a ton of money too, and there's a lot of money coming off the books. So I know that free agency isn't the way to build a team. I mean, we have one of the oldest, most expensive teams in baseball right now, and it's because of free agency. And it didn't really pan out. So we need somebody who can be at the helm of player development, who can develop players. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I really do think that they've got the pieces and they can retool enough that this team can be somewhat of a long shot to be a wild card team in 2026. But I'm delusional. People have told me this many times.
Yeah. So I guess I'm the only one that hasn't went. I think you got to be at least 500, and you got to hope that the rear view mirror consists of having the Red Sox and the Tampa Bay Rays in it. If you don't have them behind us, there's no way in hell there's going to be any chance. Because one way or the other, I still think that the wild cards are all going to come out of the American League East. I really will be shocked if it's anything but that. There is some chances there between the Guardians and the Twins, but I don't know if both those teams are going to hold on to the extent that they're currently playing at, is my question. And for Juan's sake here, I hope that the Astros stay in the damn basement.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Them and the Rangers, honestly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's completely strangely okay with both of those. But I think at the end of the day, though, that's where they have to be. And if they are not in it at that point, I really do think they need to look at themselves in the mirror and figure out what they want to do, because I do think nuking this thing could actually reap benefits quickly. And I guess if you guys don't have anything else to add, I'll let you go, but that's kind of where my piece was to where I was going to bring up my topic. Anyway.
Perfect.
Go for it.
Bring up your topic. Let's do it. Let's close this thing out, Craig.
All right.
Bring us home, buddy.
Press
What's
the button. We nuke it. Everybody's gone. We're going to be trading Vladdy, Bo, everybody outside of the guys that we have on big contracts, which we're obviously, I think we're one way or the other, unless we pull off a Vernon Wells-like move. I think we're going to be stuck with Springer's contract.
Moreno still owns that team, man. He might be all right.
It might be still that whole thing. But to that point, we have good pitching. There's some good pieces in our minor league system that are starting to get to the top end. You do have the guys like Davis Schneider, Ernie Clement, and some of these guys that have become starters and role players to this team. If you're able to turn around and flip the Vlads, the Bows, Alek Manoah, I don't care. Who are you targeting with those big names at this trade deadline that you're hoping to be able to take advantage of? The best, according to MLB Pipeline, the teams with the most top 100 prospects in baseball are the Chicago Cubs, obviously the Baltimore Orioles, because we get to deal with them every day, the Cincinnati Reds, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Padres. There's a couple on there that are in contending moods, but the one I would love to attack myself is selfishly go after the Pittsburgh Pirates money pot there and give them the talent they need to exceed in the near future, with maybe some send-offs that Ben Cherington's already familiar with. But that's my thought.
What would it take to get Skeens from Pittsburgh to Toronto?
I'm not thinking I get Skeens, but they got some guys that are still on their lower parts of that list. But
no, I think the Cubs,
that would be interesting for the Blue Jays' future.
Yeah, I think the Cubs and the Padres are probably going to be the two teams where you could potentially poach their farm system. The infield is tough, so I don't think Bo and Vladdy are necessarily targets for a team like San Diego, because they just turn shortstops into everyday position players in that franchise. But I think those two teams, Cubs and Padres, could be two teams that line up pretty well for you guys. And if Yimmy goes on the block there, give us a call. We tend to do well with Blue Jays bullpen pieces. We'll take Pearson too. We'll give you guys some, not anything good, but we'll take Pearson and Yimmy, no problem.
I'm willing to give you.
Juan's trying to package a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I kind of have my eyes on the Cubs. They're a team that I can see. They've got some really high-end prospects there. Pete Crow Armstrong is an interesting prospect, to say the least. The Padres also is interesting. Fernando Tatis Jr. and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., childhood friends, have been pals their whole life. I know that Padres have a first baseman in Cronenworth.
Yeah, but Cronenworth was somebody that you could probably move to left field. Like, he's not a traditional first baseman. He's a middle infield guy. You can move him elsewhere to make room for a young potential superstar like Vladdy for sure. They'll fit him in. I mean, they just traded for Reyes too, right?
2B for the most part of his career, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Baltimore is interesting, and would I like to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wearing the Baltimore Oriole
Don't do
on
it.
his chest? I do not. But there's
some talent there.
There is some talent there, and there is obviously the fact that his father ended his career with the Baltimore Orioles, and there is that Vladdy hates the Yankees, so there is that appeal. Baltimore would buy right into Vladdy, and Vladdy would be like 5th on that pecking order. But
I can't imagine trading him within the division.
I couldn't either.
Me neither.
That is such a dangerous game to play.
True. I mean, I guess it would depend on the return, right? But I just can't imagine that happening.
Signs an extension and turns into the Hall of Fame player we think he is.
Yeah. Well, and that's
but
listen, this is the risk.
3 potentials from him.
This is the risk with offloading a guy like Bo and Vlad. Like, they're going to do well. We've watched them have good careers up until this point. Have they been slightly disappointing in certain facets of their game? Absolutely. Have we seen them at their best? Maybe. We've seen them probably pretty darn close. Even if Vladdy exceeds 2021 in some crazy world at some point in his career, it's not going to be blowing past it. So I don't know. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard on Jays fans. I think we're going to see a lot of success out of guys who leave that were like, we knew it was in them. But
I want to acknowledge the grounds crew again here. They proposed a interesting trade to me just because I'm familiar with the Mariners organization. But Keith Duncan says Bo Bichette and a prospect for Harry Ford of the Seattle Mariners. Harry Ford's hitting about 340. Young athletic catcher. He could use some upgrading in terms of defense. We're not sure he's going to stick back there, especially with the Mariners having Cal Raleigh. But he is somebody that we've discussed at length as a potential trade piece just because he is blocked. What do you guys think? I mean, I would entertain Bo Bichette for Harry Ford straight up without you guys throwing in a prospect. But if you want to give us a kicker, I mean, I don't think we say no on our end.
I was wondering if it actually needed to be a throwing guy our direction, personally, if that was how it was, but I don't know. It'd be literally the word of throw-in.
Yeah, that's
Bag
a
of
really
balls.
interesting one because, my goodness, one of the biggest thing that Mariners lineup lacks is run production, and Bo in the middle of that order would definitely,
Vintage Bo would look good in that
looking
lineup.
at his numbers the last month, it doesn't look like that. But I think a change of scenery would do Bo a lot of good. And my goodness, what an upgrade over J.P. Crawford. No offense to Crawford, who has done an admirable job.
It's not the same talent level. The only thing that I see being a hiccup is Seattle's not going to pay Bo, and they're not going to want to give up Ford for 1 year or 1.5 years of Bo.
Yeah.
And Keith Duncan here said Bo would walk from Seattle, and I have no doubts about that as well.
Yes.
With that being said, if Seattle is our rotation is it this year, we definitely believe if we can score enough runs, we'll win a World Series. Then you trade Harry Ford. You do it if you think Bo improves you and wins you a World Series. Then that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Okay, let's end it on that. Big thank you to the grounds crew who has been very patient with us as we had to flip feeds halfway through or right off the top. So thanks for letting everyone know and getting out of there and joining us on this one. Appreciate it. At Walk Off Podcast on Twitter, The Walk Off Podcast on Instagram. Baseball Town in Toronto, May 30th. I will put tickets in the comments once I get off here. Same thing goes for Seattle, July 6th. Kirby Sneed and Taylor Cicero as guests. Very excited for that. I'm going to bug Jen to come and join us on a Baseball Town here. We're doing it monthly in Toronto, so maybe June or July we can twist her arm and get her down there too. Craig, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to give a quick plug to anything that you're doing right now? I know Jaybird Watching is back up and going, but on a different day now, correct?
Yeah, we're on Thursday evenings now at 7 o'clock, similar to what we're doing here. We just do it quick in an hour. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't you possibly coming and joining us on Thursday?
You are not wrong. I will be there. We'll see you then. Looking forward to it.
Just checking. It's a 2-for-1 deal. He gets me, I get him on my show. So, but no, Same feels. I just hope it's the same level of shenanigans and comedy that we provide during our hour as well.
Okay, and I've been practicing this. This is the process. Jen's Twitter handle for everyone out there is at baseball 2 L's. I don't know how I missed an L this time. Just mental lapses, right? But I'm working so hard. At baseball _ Jen 2 N's. Just a lovely follow. Get on there, follow Jen. Great baseball insight, great baseball mind. Juan Forno, host of the Walk Off Mariners. Juan, give everybody the lowdown on where they can follow you.
Yeah, if you're all things baseball and want to tune in to the AL West, you can check us out at the Walk Off Mariners. You can check me out at Baseball Town Live in July in Seattle, but I'm also going to be joining Scott in August in Toronto, coming out to talk baseball out there in August. So, I hope to see y'all out at either venue, whether it's West Coast or East Coast. I'm looking forward to those live events. I think they'll be a lot of fun.
And on that, thank you very much, everybody. Take care until next Sunday, where I'm a fingers crossed. Next Sunday, we're like so smooth, no problems, no hiccups, no nothing. But I'm at the point now where I can't guarantee a freaking thing. So.